Morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to make a friendly minor request to speaking. Please speak directly into a microphone if you can. That way we can pick it up for the folks that are listening online. Start with, I'd like to ask if there's any corrections to the minutes from the last meeting at all. Anybody have? Hearing none, we'll move on to the first discussion item, and after that.
John, can I interrupt you real quick before we get too far? So the Board of Trustees changed the bylaws last meeting, and part of that changed a little bit of how the Board of Managers operates. One of the things in there would allowed the Board of Managers to set a presiding officer, and it also allowed for entities like the City of San Marcos and San Antonio Water System to appoint someone to this. I don't know if y'all feel it appropriate to go ahead and select that presiding officer, or if y'all would prefer to have that as an agenda item for next month. The Board of Trustees is authorized us to do it. Might as well do it. It is not.
I'd like to move forward because this is probably one of the few meetings where everybody's here.
Yeah.
Second that.
I'd nominate Justin Ivacek.
I second that.
Any other nominations? Everybody good with that move? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I don't know how I'm running the meeting now, but.
I would like to make a comment, Justin, going to chair the meeting. Agenda item number 9, I'd like to move up front after Brandon has his opening remarks regarding construction committee. New Gen is on the phone or online listening, and I've asked them to give reports on Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch operating costs, and then also to report on the methodology that they've developed recently for annual overage pays Caldwell. I know that Chris Eckert is listening online, so I'll turn it over back to you, Justin, and I think Brandon has some opening.
Yeah, whatever route y'all want to go. If y'all want me to start with the construction committee notes, I can. You may remember that we asked to switch my meeting with this meeting so that y'all could get a chance to hear what the construction committee is going to recommend to the full Board of Trustees at Monday night's meeting. Y'all can choose to make a similar recommendation, or you can choose to do nothing. You will not hurt my feelings, but I think it's important for the Board of Managers to hear so that they can provide their Board of Trustee members with some feedback on what we're proposing so that they understand what's going on. It's always difficult. The construction committee gets a little more in the weeds than the Board of Trustees, obviously. And it's difficult sometimes for the trustee members to pick up on everything right away. And I think it's important for the Board of Managers to be informed. We met last Tuesday, October 31st, and had a few items on the TxDOT relocation project. So you may remember we're doing the IH-10 Santa Clara and Zool line, and we're doing a FM 1518 relocation project. Utility Engineering Group proposed a change order number 2, which increased the casing size for the project from 36-inch to 42-inch. That cost increase was $11,522.31, which brought our supplemental agreement with TxDOT for the project to a total cost of $694,327.18. Of that money, $128,422.97 will be directly paid by TxDOT, and the remainder, which is a little over $565,904, will be paid by CRWA and then reimbursed by TxDOT at a future date. As many of you know, that takes a little bit of time to get that reimbursement, but it is fully reimbursable, and this item was already budgeted for. It's actually been budgeted for the last 2 years. And so the construction committee made a recommendation to approve change order number 2 and to approve the supplemental agreement number 1. And I think we have that further in the agenda for y'all to make a decision on whether y'all want to make a similar recommendation. You're welcome to ask me more questions about it. If not, we do have David Kniper here with Utility Engineering Group who can help explain a little further for any other information. On the 1518 project, not much to update the board of managers on. That project, just as a reminder, is going to be 80% borne by CRWA and 20% reimbursement. So it's a little bit opposite of what we're talking about here. We're happy that at least some of it's reimbursable, but for the most part, Canyon Regional's on the hook for that. And that was also a budgeted item, so it wasn't a surprise. UEG also updated us on the GIS system. Originally, CRWA staff was taking the measurements and the GPS coordinates for some of CRWA's facilities, but John had moved the staff member to a treatment plant, and that left a gap in finishing that work. Utility engineering group proposed to finish that work as a coordinated effort between them and Colliers Engineering, which I believe used to be KFW, at a not to exceed cost of $42,337.50. They expect to be able to finish the measurement in about 8 weeks or so, and then provide information for CRWA and take a little more time to address any of CRWA's comments. That was also a recommendation that the construction committee is going to take forward. They continue to do the work on the standards and specifications, and David expects to be complete sometime here this month. We're still looking at the Hayes-Caldwell pipeline alignments. There's a number of different alignment routes that staff are looking at. They all have their pros and cons, easements, right-of-way, bores, just different aspects. David's been working on some of the numbers of a estimate per foot cost, both for easements and for construction, and looking also at the plan improvements that it would take to have a dedicated pipeline. At Lake Dunlap, CRWA is working on contract negotiations with Garver. John, do you know, have those been complete yet, or are we still working with Garver on the contract?
It's in Trey's court right now. He's a little backlogged. I know that Garver has requested some minor non-consequential edits, which Trey is working on. We'll get back to him. And as soon as that's completed, then we can begin negotiating the scope of work and contract.
And so one of the things we talked about the construction committee is limiting the changes to that master agreement. The construction committee had worked on that agreement last year to try and standardize the agreement between all the different engineering firms. And so as you can imagine, if you've got a standard agreement and you make a whole bunch of changes to it, you no longer have a standard agreement. You just have different agreements with everyone. And so we're hoping to keep those agreements as standard as they can be. There's obviously some minor language changes that we can accept, but we don't want to accept major changes. We're hoping that Hayes-Caldwell improvements, phase 1 will go out to bid. The phase 1 improvements are the tank, some electrical work and some pipe work. That existing tank out there has been leaking for a number of years, and staff's worked hard to try and keep the tank from leaking and be in violation, but they felt that it was in the best interest for the Hayes-Caldwell group to at least move forward with phase 1 and then go out as soon as possible on the phase 2, which would be some of the remaining components. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to have a recommendation for us until January, which is going to delay us a little bit, but the bid should be out later on this month. The other thing that CRWA staff provided was a reimbursement resolution for the Hayes-Caldwell membrane project. So Hayes-Caldwell has a few different projects going on. We've got this Hayes-Caldwell transmission line. We've got the improvements that include tanks and clear wells and ozone and detention ponds and a number of other items. And then there's the failing membranes within the membrane building itself. Ardura had a scope that the Hayes-Caldwell group initially met on, and they approved a reduced scope of about $110,000. That group got together again and determined it was in their best interest to go ahead and approve the remainder of the base scope. And so what CRWA did was provide a reimbursement resolution for that project, and then a recommendation to approve the second service order for the remaining $659,415.50. And again, that's just for the base scope. There's some supplemental scope items related to water development board funding and some additional investigations if a membrane building's needed. The construction committee is recommending moving forward with that, but we requested that the recommendation come with a revised schedule. The schedule we had on the service order was an old schedule, was I think a few months out of date, if I remember correctly, and it needed to be updated. We received some updates on Wells Ranch 3. Staff's still working towards 13,000 acre feet total, and we did have that initial application for 920 acre feet, which is currently being contested. I will take any questions related to that, and we can get into more specific questions later on the agenda items too, if y'all have it come up. Thank you.
All right, so you said, John, you need to start with number 9.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, I have a question and just a point of clarification. With regards to item number 9, I know it was sent out to the Board of Trustees and there was a discussion as to violating the Open Meetings Act and walking quorum. And I'm not trying to stop this item. I just, that was a point brought up. Currently, there's 5 board members at this table. Now, maybe Brandon, you can clarify. Is the Board of Managers a committee of the Board of Trustees? Therefore, we can sit here and we can discuss, or is the Board of Managers separate?
Board of Managers has no authority over the governance of Canyon Regional. It is really just a committee of managers, although some managers have dual roles like myself and yourself. We both are on the Board of Trustees. We have Randy here who's on the Board of Trustees also, but is not a member of the Board of Managers. That's a good question, Humberto. I don't know if it ended up being a quorum of Board of Trustees on the Board of Managers, what comes from that. But any decision y'all make or recommendation y'all make isn't binding at all on Canyon Regional because we just don't have the authority to do that.
So my point is we can still have discussion on this particular item. So I
Yes,
just
I
wanted to
would
be
think so.
aware because there was an email sent out and typically, there's 5 members here of the Board of Trustees. And so
And we need 11 for a quorum, so I think we're perfectly fine there.
as long as we're not having a walking quorum, whatever that is. But I'm fine with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All righty. Chris, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay in there?
We can.
Yes.
All right, very good. Well, good morning. Chris Eckert with NewGen Strategies and Solutions. Pleasure to be with you virtually today. I appreciate the accommodation. Want to very briefly walk through, and John, I think you can confirm for me, everybody received a copy of the presentation we put together on the Hayes-Caldwell true-up analysis. Is that correct?
Yes, and,
Okay.
and before you jump into that, maybe you'll come
Absolutely.
secondly, but we also wanted to give
Okay.
us an update on where you're at on the blending of the fixed costs.
Absolutely.
Either one, pick which one you'd like to do first.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't have the agenda pulled up. I apologize if I'm moving things around. Is that what is your preference, Justin? Do you want me to start with Hayes-Caldwell? Do you want me to start with the fixed cost blending?
You can start with the Lake Dunlap Wells Ranch.
Okay.
Do we have the presentation printed here? I don't see it in the packet. We don't.
Just that update.
Just a verbal update.
Okay.
Okay. So verbal update on that. One thing that is we've gone through the exercise of looking at the fixed cost blending again to bring everybody up to speed here. During the budget process, there was discussion of further blending some of the cost for Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch. And as we've worked with authority staff, as we've gone through that, one of the things we did is we went in and we looked at the unit cost of a number of items. We started with operations and maintenance expense, the fixed operations and maintenance expense. We looked at the raw water side as well, and then as well as the membrane cost. But some things that we noted as we went through that, raw water cost for Wells Ranch right now on a per unit basis is much higher. At the same time, within the 24 budget, there is no membrane cost associated with Wells Ranch. So as we begin to look at the unit cost of service between Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch, it's our opinion that at this time it doesn't necessarily make sense to try and blend raw water cost and membrane cost. However, when you look at the operations and maintenance cost, the fixed O&M cost, right now we're calculating a per unit cost per acre foot of subscribed capacity at Lake Dunlap of slightly over $100 an acre foot. As you look at Wells Ranch, it's about $97.53 to be exact, per acre foot. Anytime you're coming in and trying to combine cost, it's our opinion that when those unit rates, that unit cost of service gets closer, it makes sense at that time to blend those costs. And right now, as I look at Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch, it's my opinion that those costs are about as close as they're probably ever going to be. So if the trustees want to move forward with blending of costs between Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch, which, as I've told you before, I think makes all the sense in the world as the authority continues to grow and continues to add additional phases of projects. What my recommendation to you would be to go ahead with fixed cost blend or fixed O&M cost blending of Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch at this time. We've run numbers on that. I don't, in my opinion, I don't think it swings costs significantly between the participants. What it will result in is a little bit lower cost for Lake Dunlap participants, a little bit higher cost for Wells Ranch participants, but most entities are in both. But again, to me, it doesn't swing costs significantly if you were to go ahead and just blend the fixed O&M cost at this time. We're happy to provide more exhibits behind this, what this would look like. That would probably be the next step in this exercise, but that would be my recommendation to this group. Go ahead and look at that. But for right now, set aside any cost blending on raw water and membrane cost.
Okay,
No, I
thank
threw a
you.
lot at you there. Any questions on that?
I've got a question, Chris. This is Humberto. So basically, if you were to institute this process, it probably wouldn't take place until probably next year, correct? 2026.
So this is Brandon Rohan. I think the discussion was maybe attempting to put this in place for January 24,
Oh, so
in the beginning of the second quarter, if it
Okay.
didn't require substantial budget amendments. The concern was if it was going to be something where someone was going up
Okay.
$100,000, we wouldn't want to try and hit someone with that. So if the numbers are relatively close, I think the trustees could decide whether they felt like it was warranted. Again, I brought this up. My concern again is all of East Central's water comes from Wells Ranch starting January 1st. But I'm paying rates for Dunlap, which doesn't make a whole ton of sense, especially with the interconnectedness of these two facilities at this point.
Well,
Makes
and
sense.
yeah, and again, the idea here is to the extent we are a regional authority, to the extent we can move to some kind of system cost, not on the bond side, not violating bonds, not touching bonds at all, but if we can move to more of a blended cost concept, I think it's going to be in the authority's interest in the long term to do that. Does that create potential subsidies? Yes. We want to keep those subsidies small where possible, but as a regional authority, we are better together than we are individually. And anytime you're in a regional authority, there will be subsidies that happen from time to time. But over the long term, the idea is that those subsidies will ebb and flow and correct themselves over time. Numerically, what we're talking about here is $18,000 on a total of about $2.27 million. This is easily less than I guess it's 0.079% or 0.79%. It's less than 1% swing on this. So I think if you wanted to move forward with this in January, it's certainly something you could do. We can have numbers for the next meeting so everybody can see how this is going to move, but I don't think it's going to have a significant impact on the budget.
Chris, Tyler Yorth, San Marcos. You mentioned that now's the time to blend them because they're so close together.
Yes.
Are you advising, though, that over time as we go forward, that we still evaluate those to make sure that they remain close together? Or are you suggesting once you blend them, it's blended and you just move on? Or is there a check step later on where you validate that they're still close enough that makes sense?
You could certainly validate as you go forward, but again, as I said, the benefit of a regional authority is we're all better together, and we recognize that there are subsidies, and those subsidies will ebb and flow over time. It would be my recommendation that once you go this direction, you don't look back. You continue to move forward to a system concept, a regional concept. But if you wanted to continue to evaluate this, it's certainly something you could do.
Any more questions for Chris? Are we looking to make a recommendation to the trustees to move forward? This has already been approved to.
As much as I wanted to move forward, I think without having like some of that presentation or methodology out there, it's kind of difficult
Yeah,
for me, even though I'm the one that asked for it, to have all y'all make that recommendation to move forward with the full board. I don't know if we can explain it to the full board, to be honest with you, with the presentation we just got. No offense, Chris, you do a wonderful
No.
job, and
What,
and I always
well,
appreciate the work you do.
what I'd recommend is let us put firm numbers together, show you what the budgetary impact is. We can bring that at the next meeting so everybody can see it, or we can distribute that in advance of the next meeting. I really think once you see the impacts and how small they are, I'm hopeful that there will be comfort in moving forward that direction, but we're happy to provide more information there.
Okay, I don't think our next meeting will be until January, so we may push that to February.
Okay.
For the trustees. Okay, if there's no more comments or questions on that, let's, Chris, move on to the rate methodology for the Hayes Caldwell annual overages.
Okay, fantastic. I will do that. And again, I believe everybody received a number of items that John had sent out on this particular topic. We've been down this road before. We're continuing to go down this road, looking at what happens when an entity overuses their capacity, their subscribed capacity within a particular project. And here we're looking at Hayes Caldwell. The idea is that, to try and develop a methodology that could potentially be utilized for the other systems if we decide to go that way, but really just focused on Hayes Caldwell at this time. The methodology I have for you today is very similar to what we've presented before. We worked with authority staff to go through this. We believe that this represents a reasonable path forward, but happy to answer any questions as we go through this. One of the things I do want to remind you is there is an inherent complexity in this idea of a true-up, because when you look at how the authority's budget is constructed, there are a number of components. There are bond payments, there are O&M payments, there's line use payments, all of these different elements, and there are different allocations for those elements based on the contract that's being applied, and how different entities have participated in those various contracts. That introduces a complexity. You really have to properly true up, you've got to drill down into certain components. And so when you see this, the chart I have up on the screen right now is just demonstrating what those components are. As we true up the cost, what we've done is we are looking at those buckets of dollars so that we true up properly. We've got another spreadsheet on this I'll show in just a minute, and we can show how these dollars flow back to the entities that did not overuse their capacity. But I'd also remind you, this is an after the fact process. We are not changing the current budget allocation. We are not changing the budget. We are not changing the contract. We are not changing the allocation of bonds. This does not impact anything that we're doing now. This is all is meant to be an after the fact true up process. So I do want to be very, very clear on that. This is all after the fact. We are not impacting the bonds through this effort. But as I've said, again, we have different elements that are occurring within Hayes Caldwell. We have the 2003 contract that is used to allocate some cost at this time. We have the 2021 contract that is used to allocate some cost at this time. We then have certain entities that have participated in the raw water sources, whereas others have not. And so again, that's some of the differences that you see in this process, and we have to reflect that in the true-up process, because that's how you're paying for cost right now. And so we want to align with that process. But what we're suggesting you do is you go in and you look at these components of cost. So we have plant bonds, we have raw water bonds, we have fixed O&M cost, membrane repair and replacement, and the line use cost. And you can see there are volumes. In this case, we've stated it as kgals, 1,000 gallons. We've taken the per acre foot subscription, translated it into thousands of gallons. But the idea here is that when someone goes over on an annual basis, this is not done on peak day. I know we've talked about that in the past, but what we're looking at here is total annual use. If you go in and exceed on an annual basis your total use, you would then be applied a true up, and it would be based on the volumes that you see here, which match back to how cost is allocated in the budget right now. If you want to look at this on a per acre foot basis, we've done that as well. You can see how the different contracts play in on a per acre foot basis. All we're doing on the prior slide is translating that to per 1,000 gallons. So what we've done here is we've taken the budgeted cost, we are dividing by the volumes to get a unit cost. I'm going to back up and look at this on a per 1,000 gallons per acre foot. So for example, on the plant bonds right now, that's $1.09 per acre foot, or excuse me, per 1,000 gallons. For every 1,000 gallons an entity goes over, they would pay $1.09 per 1,000 gallons, and that would be distributed back ratably to those entities that did not go over. That distribution back would be based on their subscribed volumes, because that's how they're paying for the cost. So we're trying to marry up this process as we look at this. If you were to go up and add up these numbers all the way across, that's about $3.86 per 1,000 gallons. That would change per year based on the budget. And again, the true up would apply once you go over an amount on an annual basis. So we would look at the budget, we would do these calculations, we would come in at the end of the year. Now there is a question right now about year, because we do track water for permitting purposes and reporting to the state. We track that on a calendar year basis, but your fiscal year runs October to September. Our calculations here are all based on a fiscal year basis. So we would look at this, we would propose that we look at the true up on a fiscal year basis. I know that's an outstanding question relative to state reporting on an annual basis. That's just something that would have to be reconciled there. But just to drill in just a little bit more right quick, just to give you an idea of what this process looks like, and I'm just looking at the treatment plant bonds here. You see we have our total budgeted cost. We're dividing by our subscribed capacity. That gives us a cost per unit. We then add on administrative cost. When you look at administrative cost for the authority right now, that is allocated to the entities based on their total cost of service. We're maintaining that methodology in the true up. That really amounts to about 6% on top of the direct cost of service. So we've built in admin cost here as well to continue to true that up as well. So again, trying to follow the budget process as closely as we can. The other thing I would note for you, and I'm going to just jump down here, is to the raw water side of things. Raw water would be included as part of a true up. We're not proposing to do this by source. We would propose that you do this based on a composite of all sources. In this case, 57 cents per 1,000 gallons based on the 2024 budget. Again, we can go back and look at this on 2023, but based on 2024, it would be 57 cents per 1,000 gallons for the raw water true up. But again, those volumes are different. Martindale has water that is outside, it's independent of what's under the authority. So there, the true up there and the return to Martindale would be different because they have a different amount of raw water under the contract. So let me stop there. That's method. I do have, and I believe everybody has seen a spreadsheet. Let me put that spreadsheet up. While I pull that up, are there questions on methodology here?
This is Humberto Ramos, County Line. With regards to what occurred this year, we would basically do the fiscal year. So that I believe the overage occurred in October, so we're within fiscal year. We're not having to go back through annual, so we're fine this year. So I see where the logic works on fiscal year. Is there any problem with regards to reporting water annually? I don't see a problem right now, but I just wanted to ask that question because, we report water annually. So water, one would presume that firm water is used first. I'm not sure how we manage things here, but, just thinking logically, is there going to be some threat of using water that potentially is not available? What is the concern, or is there a concern? And maybe you don't know this, Chris, but I just thought I'd ask that because again, fiscally it works now because overage occurred in October. But within the fiscal year, we'd use those new numbers that the budget was prepared for by Joan. Makes sense. The question is, with regards to water supply, is there any jeopardy or is there anything we need to be watching out for?
as I look at it, and I'll ask John and Adam to jump in here as well, because they've been more in the details on the timing probably than I have. But your budget's based on a fiscal year. It's my opinion that the true up should be based on a fiscal year, and in doing so, you're capturing 12 months of use. It's not going to be a perfect match to your annual use, but as long as you stick with a 12-month period and look at a 12-month period, you're truing up to a 12-month period. So, of course, there will be a 2-month timing difference there, but as long as you stay and be consistent with 12 months every time, it should work itself out over time. I'll ask John and Adam to provide their comments there. Again, I see personally no problem with a fiscal year analysis here.
Yeah. Oh, when it comes to water supply and a call on water rights, what you're referring to, Umberto, was the water rights that we have, like at the Hayes Caldwell plant. It's based off of priority. What the oldest right is. They're the ones that kind of have the authority to be able to call on. And the Baugh right and the Cummings right are some of the oldest rights on the San Marcos. And so there's not a huge chance, believe it or not, that they would be called upon. The GBRA water, however, that comes from Lake Dunlap here, GBRA kind of has control over that, and that priority date goes back to 1957. And so somebody ultimately could call on that GBRA right, or GBRA, as we're going to talk a little bit later, is talking about water restrictions if we were to reach stage 3.
But I think what we saw was, or what we heard from Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, he wants to match up the water consumption to the fiscal year. And that's a problem because we report on calendar year. And so if you try and use fiscal year, I mean, you could end up over reporting or not even capturing the cost correctly. If I use a whole bunch of water at the end of the year, and not so much, that doesn't make a whole ton of sense. To me, you'd want to keep it calendar year. And the question then comes, do y'all want to allocate it based on fiscal year 23 costs or 24 costs, which I think is probably much easier than trying to address water consumption in a period of October to September 30th, when your real consumption data is January 1 to December 31. I think you've got to keep those matched up if you try and do anything else.
Can I make a comment on that, please? This is Joan. So this whole deal is dollars, and I understand it's on usage and if you go over, but we're billing on a fiscal year. And so what would happen is you're going to end up having to take, if you're going to base on dollar amounts, you're going to have 2 fiscal years that you're going to have to take into account if you're doing it by what you're reporting to the water master. I'm just saying that's, and so then when are you going to start it? Are you, this whole deal is to someone that's gone over to pay the entities that didn't go over, and those are dollars. And it's a dollar amount. It's not water drops.
But once you go over, you go over. So let's say you go over in July.
Why not base it on a fiscal year? You start, if you're going to do it in October, and then like Chris said, it will even itself out once we get going with this.
I just don't know why you wouldn't base it on the calendar year and the actual true consumption that happened in that year.
But it's still a true consumption on a fiscal year.
Only if everyone takes their exact amount every single month, but that's not the way we work. We take more in the summer and less in the winter. Sometimes you take more in the winter to catch up. Like East Central has multiple contracts. So there are times where we'll back off Canyon Regional, increase our SAWS contract to meet our take or pay there. And so that consumption changes. And to me, if you just keep it based on the calendar year and the consumption in calendar year, if you go over in July, you're paying fiscal year 23. If you go over in August and September, fiscal year 23. The second you go over in October, you've already put all the new rates in. You're in fiscal year 24. To me, that just seems like the simplest way to do
But
it.
you're looking at 12 months, whether it's a calendar year or fiscal year. That's kind of the way I look at it. So you might have October in this fiscal year, or you have October in a calendar year, And those are two different things where I think you're still looking at 12 months.
Yeah, again, though, the consumption is what I'm concerned about. Is somebody truly going over their contract in September of October of that year? The answer is no, because they may still have 2 months to go. But if they used a whole lot in November or December the year prior, you're saying they went over and we're billing them for going over when really and they didn't. That's my concern.
We talked about water droplets, and I hear you. I just think the management of the water is very important here, because what was said, I would agree with what was said. I've done this many times when I was at Baramed, and we had a lot more water than this. And there's an approach to this, because at the end, what you're assuming here is that the water that's available for the others to use hasn't been used, and it's firm water, correct? Because if you get to a drought, you want the most firm water to be used for the other entities. So you would use non-firm water right off the bat if there was enough beginning of the year. And when we presume there's rainfall, there's water flow, you would use those non-firm water. The question becomes, when you use non-firm water, the entities, are they all part of that non-firm water, all four entities? When you come to the firm water, are the same four entities involved? Because if not, you're using water that one may not be tied to, if you will, or it may be that I no longer have firm water because my water was non-firm, being county line, and it was used in the beginning. So at the end, I don't have any stake at the game. We need to think about that, because that's gonna be questions gonna be asked. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me what was explained to me with regards to staff, but nevertheless, I think this is the first time we're doing this, and I'm willing, I don't want to say gamble, I'm willing to move forward to see how this works out, whether it's fiscal year. I just want to be assured that at the end, when those dollars are distributed, that they're going to those entities that have that supply of water that has been contracted through either GBRA or they've went into bonds and through the state, and they've got that. That's all I'm asking. To me, fiscal year makes sense. I know we have, but again, this is the first time. Maybe it gets morphed. You know, I've heard conversations that others or within the group are bringing water supplies. Great. You know, maybe this is just a one-time deal, but I do not want this to stop. I just thought that was an important question to ask, because at the end, you know, I want to make sure that the money that if there is money to be distributed, that it get distributed accordingly to those who have those rights at the end, and the counting is done right off the bat correctly. Now, this year, again, because the way counting was done with calling in the water master water, I do not know. And I'm assuming it was done correctly. And at the end, you know, the numbers that Chris has are appropriately going to those entities. That's all I'm asking.
Well, and I just jump in here and say one more time, 12 months. We've got to capture 12 months, whether it's annual, whether it's fiscal. It's, you know, I agree with Joan that if we're doing it annually, you're crossing two fiscal periods. You've got different costs for October through December versus earlier in the year. It introduces some complexity there. But regardless, you've got to capture 12 months, however you do it.
Chris, this is Justin. So in your previous discussion on the Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch, you were talking about regional water supplies and subsidies and ebbs and flows. With the numbers you're seeing in this, when you analyze Hayes Caldwell, that doesn't fall into that ebb and flow type situation.
Well, we've not looked at Hayes Caldwell in conjunction with Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch. I've not looked at all three together. It's possible there's cost blending there. It's possible we could move that direction, but we almost have different philosophies between what we're trying to do between these two efforts. In the fixed cost blending, we're moving more towards a system. Here on the Hayes Caldwell side, we're looking at making sure I only pay for what I used, and I get, you know, I get exactly what I've subscribed to, and I don't pay any more for that. So it's even different philosophies here. And again, I don't want to get too far off base here, but we're a regional authority. We benefit because we're better together than we are apart. It's always been my opinion that the more that we can move to more of a system concept, a regional concept, we're better off. However, I do want to be responsive to the entities and making sure that we are meeting your goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives are different between these two efforts right now. And Justin, I don't know if I've answered your question there or not, so I apologize if I didn't.
That's okay.
Well, it's really the only difference in what he was talking about with Dunlap and Wells Ranch is the raw water. Is there that much difference in cost? Are those costs for raw water allocated differently to this group? And so I think, Chris, the question is, if they're allocated differently and there's different costs with those different water rights, you know, Justin, I think that's probably what you're asking. Are those numbers all so close that they're inconsequential? Or are they, you know, is Foster different than Cummins by large amounts?
So when you go back, sorry, I'm bouncing between multiple presentations and screens here. Just looking at, you know, raw water cost right now. Let me put this back up on the screen here. So, you know, as you look at the individual unit cost right now, GBRA water, according to the 24 budget and based on the volumes, is 54 cents per 1,000 gallons. Baugh is 23 cents per thousand. Cummings is 96 cents per 1,000 gallons. And right now we don't have any cost on the Foster water right now. On a composite basis, it's 57 cents per 1,000 gallons. But there's varying elements here. It is my recommendation that when you're truing up, you use the 57 cents per 1,000 gallons, regardless of where the water's coming from. You could certainly go down and look at the individual sources of water and how the individual sources of water are used, but at some point, water's water, and trying to identify down to the molecule is a bit of a nebulous exercise. We can't label water. We can certainly try and track it. We can certainly try and do that, and we have to for some reporting purposes. But at some point, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is really what it comes down to.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any more on your presentation?
Nothing on the presentation. I will put up. Was there a comment there? I apologize if I talked over somebody.
I apologize. I was just coughing, Chris.
Oh, okay.
This
Let
is
me go.
Stephen with,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
this is Stephen with Martindale Water. I had a question, and Chris, it may be more for Adam. The concept of overage is applied by the contract, and is that a fiscal year?
In the contract, it is based off of fiscal year,
So
That's-
overages are from October to October,
from October to September, through
September
September.
31st.
Yep.
Okay. One more question. We're basically talking, let's say theoretically 44.81 acre feet of overage for last month. What block of water did that come from?
It was a partial between the Cummings and the Baugh,
The Cummings that
Is that's-
Canyon Regional controls.
because that's what I have left to
Okay.
choose from.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
The only other thing I'd add, and again, I think everybody has seen this. I believe this was distributed. This takes the fiscal year 24 values and applies this method. Now, it applies it for a 10-month period, looking at January through October. So you can see the unit values. You see the volumes that have been used. Now, one thing I do want to note here is the column, the numbers in blue here, these annual consumption amounts. We know those amounts. As we get over into the plant bonds and some of these other elements, what we're having to do is basically look at some kind of ratable use based on total use. So I can't come in and tell you that for the raw water bonds, county line used 43,258 per 1,000 gallons. We don't know that number. So there's a ratable exercise we go through to derive that amount. Basically, if you're going over your annual use, that's going to show up in the other areas as well through a mathematical calculation. But what you ultimately see, and again, this is January through October, you see the overage. In this case, the only overage is for Crystal Clear. We flow that through. So the payment for this overage at this point for these 10 months is $53,698, and you see then we distribute that back to the other entities based on the capacities in the project. So this is just meant to demonstrate process, demonstrate method, but the time period here is not a full 12-month period.
So Chris, what's the rate again? Was it $4 or $3 per thousand?
I think if you add it up, it's like $368 per thousand. But again, it's different for different entities based on how they participate in the components. So it's not just a 368 applied to everybody. We're doing this on a component basis.
Chris, this is John Coffin.
Mhm.
I just wanted to point out, in my recent discussions with you and Megan, Megan had made an adjustment to the raw water factor.
That's right.
Per 1,000 gallons. It's now 60 cents because of the add-on of the administrative fee of 6%. So the red number that you see there in that total column was adjusted to 54,157.39.
Yeah, I apologize that I missed that. We should have updated this, but you're correct. There's the raw water number is slightly higher, and we can get this fixed and back out. Didn't make a huge change, but there was a minor change there.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let me ask staff, this is Humberto. With regards to what's left, you mentioned the Cummings and the Ball. Is there enough water left to carry over? Because one would presume, again, crystal clear, and I don't mean to call it crystal clear, but they're gonna have an overage in November and they're gonna have an overage in December. Is there enough water to allow all the other entities to meet their needs these 2 months and allow crystal clear to have that overage based on the Ball and Cummings permits?
Well, you'd also have to include GBRA water in that as
Within
well.
GBRA?
Yes, if you look later on in the report, you can see how the trend is working out. It's going to land about somewhere it did last year. Like I said, in the trend, you can see where it's going to land. It's going to be just underneath our allocation that we have for the whole plant for the calendar year.
So this work was given to Chris by the Board of Trustees by resolution. Do we want to make a recommendation to the board to, I think maybe there was some legal issues I think Trey needs to look at to see if I remembered some conversation right, if this was contractually able to do, we were able to do this, or did it violate any bonding? Did you get any answer back from our bond counsel on that?
Bond counsel, I think, is in support of this kind of a methodology because it does not violate any bond covenants.
Okay.
I think there's a bigger question as to whether or not the contract allows for this. That's a separate legal question, which we're not prepared to address.
I would recommend the Board of Managers stay away from this one just because of the long history of what's been going on here with the contract dispute and the fact it rose to a Board of Trustees level. I don't know if everyone sitting here manager wise has enough information on just what's going on here, to be honest with you. That'd be my recommendation. It's going to the board either way, regardless of what
True.
we
I
recommend.
think it's important that Trey opines on whether the contract allows Canyon Regional to implement a charge like this. I think that's important to get if this is going to be on the agenda for next Monday, which I hope it is going to be, that he could do so by then.
I mean, I'm just one manager. I mean, if y'all feel comfortable making a recommendation, I'm just one person. It's just-
I mean, I support it because it was the resolution came from our trustee. So
I will jump in here right quick. I can't speak to the legal side on the contract, but I have spoken with the authority's financial advisor. We are not changing bond allocation. We are not changing requirements under the contract. This is an after the fact process. So I know the financial advisor is on board. We are not violating bonds. They don't believe we're violating the contract. Understand that's a financial opinion, not a legal opinion. But do want to point out, this is an after the fact. We are not changing obligations under the contract.
thank you.
I will comment that it is on the agenda for the Board of Trustees. Executive Committee hasn't seen it yet, and we'll discuss.
Chris, I know this is a little late. This is Jacob Parsons, and I don't really have a big dog in this fight, but it's something that could come up in the future. The money that's being reallocated, some of that is also administrative. Is that going back to Canyon Regional for their administrative cost, or is they're not out of it altogether?
They are out of it altogether. Every dollar that we collect in terms of a true up goes back out to the entities. None of the money is proposed to stay with the authority.
Oh, because then they'll pay.
Joan, I would imagine if this was approved by the board, that it would be some type of credit on invoicing, correct? Or would it be an actual monetary exchange?
Charge and then a credit.
I've got to follow up to that. I see Brandon shaking his head. I don't know, Justin, what's going to happen because there was an MOU, as you recalled, and the MOU was generated from staff and it asked that this money go into repair and replacement, which I'm totally against. I think this needs to go back to the entities. The problem here we have here is a major problem. We have this agenda, this item for the board. The board asked for it. The problem is contractually. Can the board change the contract that they have to individual entities to have an entity pay for this new overage charge? I do not know. I do not know. That's one issue. The second issue is I want some clarity as a board member, how this is going to be dispersed. It's going to be dispersed based on what we discussed, whether it's a credit, whether it's going to be, however it's going to be. I need clarification on Monday when we take this item. What I do not want happening is, and I don't know how we do this because I thought we were going to, prior to us sitting down, we've met for many meetings, all four of us, 4 entities. We've had lawyers, we've had general managers sit down and talk about this. I was hopeful we'd sit as the 4 members and just talk about this, general manager, to get an idea of how this impacts each other and how this is the solution. I think that a lot of that could have been avoided if we had that sit down. I just do not know we have all the answers for Monday's meeting, and I'm afraid that if we have not had that sit down and clarification amongst entities, and some of us can, maybe say forego what the contract says, and I'm willing to pay because, it makes sense or whatever the case may be in jeopardy. We're forcing this down everyone's throat within these 4 entities because one would presume if this occurs next year, the same process will happen. So if we do it one time, it's going to set precedent for the subsequent times. I think it would have been a better approach to have that sit down and just talk, general manager. Those are my points. As a board member, I need more detail as to how this is going to be dispersed before I take action. We did authorize through the 4 members resolution, did authorize the board to engage Chris, and I appreciate what he's done. I mean, it's brought clarity, but the question is, where do you go from there?
Well, and I see that Chris has the disbursement laid out pretty clearly. The MOU you're talking about, nobody took up. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's useless. But you have the recommendation on how to redistribute it. And it actually laid out specifically being redistributed based on those items, not to repair and replacement, not to CRWA's admin costs, not back to general fund. But I think they can be spoken out loud at the trustee meeting, make sure they know. Because I agree, putting it in other places doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
I just wanted to state that.
But also to Umberto's point, there's still a fundamental legal question that hasn't been resolved. The MOU was to bridge where we were in July and August to getting full resolution. Part of that was because we didn't have the legal, full legal decision on where we were. So I think fundamentally you still have to get that done. Not on the Board of Trustees, but I would hope one of you would table this or just have it as a discussion item to bring everybody up to speed. But I think your Board of Trustees vote probably ought to be delayed until we have that legal issue completely resolved and everybody's satisfied with it.
We did a similar thing in 2016. The Board of Trustees voted the overage rate in 2016.
Okay, is there any more questions for Chris?
I guess I just had one more. I guess it's really for Joan. Joan, this doesn't have any impact on you closing out your 23 books, right?
No.
So we have time if you need to take that extra month. It doesn't have impact on CRWA staff.
All right, Chris.
Oh, but hold on. All right, Mr. Chair, if I may have another question. Chris, we talked about how this can be transposed within our system, but let's just stay within the Hayes Caldwell system. Once San Marcos comes online, would this be the same approach we would adopt when San Marcos comes online? I mean, have you thought about that?
Yeah, so the method is the method. The method continues to be applied going forward. It is a reflection of how costs are allocated in that budget and how water is used within a 12-month period. You can continue to add entities. You can continue to amend the contract. It will simply amend the numbers that are in the method, but the method continues to be applicable.
I would hope that this is only a temporary patch to a full contract amendment that addresses many of the problems in the Hayes Caldwell contract, not just this.
If not, yes, if not, this creates more problems down the road. It could exacerbate the situation that we're dealing with now. All right, Chris, we appreciate it.
No, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
All right, let's go back to item 2B, I guess, Saw Spring Hill Cibolo GBRA CRWA Short-Term Partial Assignment Agreement, staff.
I have asked Adam and David to weigh in on this. First, I would like to have Adam discuss the background of what this is about, what it's for. And then David, I'd like you to address the operational ramifications.
So in 2016, SAWS, Springs Hill, and Cibolo had an agreement for GBRA water. SAWS leased out 500 acre feet of GBRA water to Springs Hill. Springs Hill does not have any investment, if you will, in the Mid-Cities pipeline. So the 500 acre feet of capacity in the pipeline was leased out to the city of Cibolo. Well, that contract comes to an end December 31st, 2023, going into 24. SAWS is interested in signing a new contract with Springs Hill and with Cibolo. All of SAWS GBRA water comes back into the GBRA district or the GBRA area January 1st, 2024. And along with that, they have to change this contract. So essentially, the change in the contract would be that Springs Hill would be leasing 500 acre feet of Wells Ranch water from SAWS. And then the 500 acre feet of capacity in Mid-Cities pipeline would just stay with Cibolo. And so this contract would be good from January 1st, 2024 through the end of SAWS contract in the Lake Dunlap facility, which ends December 31st, 2028. So that's basically the history and what's occurring with this contract.
Questions for Adam? All right, moving along to number 3A, precipitation update.
Justin, I'd like David to comment on the operational ramifications of that. David, would you use the microphone, please?
So this agreement would put all the water being delivered to them on 46 metering station over here, which all the water would have to come through here. We're adding the other 2 metering stations at 467 and Hickory Forest to this so that the water can be taken over there.
How do you get the water from Wells Ranch to 46?
5-gallon buckets.
I'm serious, because
I'm serious too. It's not possible at this time, the way operations are. That's why I'm adding them other 2 metering stations in.
I have no stake in this, but I think the question becomes, who has capacity and whose capacity is being used? I would think, I'm very familiar with this because we made the deal way back when. Pyramid to Cibolo. Very familiar with how it worked here and how it's changed over time. And at the time, Springs Hill, when they made the agreement with San Antonio Water System, was for paper water. Now we're talking wet water. I have no dog, but just basically a fundamental question, how do you get wet water to them?
We can move it around and bring it through Dunlap. So right now, we can move it through Wells Ranch through their metering stations. Also, they also have the other line over there that their raw water line that's coming into the plant. You know, that could be put back into service and go that way, but just need to make sure that all of it is not being assigned 100% over here. Could create a problem.
One thing that also needs to be considered is how GBRA has defined water usage for each one of these entities. And when you look at the GBRA contract, it talks about how Springs Hill, most of their service area, including where they get water from Wells Ranch, is located in the GBRA area and has the right to use their full water in the GBRA area. There can be, to some degree, on paper, you know, Wells Ranch water is being used in Guadalupe Basin and GBRA area. So there can be on paper an exchange for that water. And so that's something that we're really going through right now, is just looking at, so, you know, where water comes from and where it's going. So it's, in terms of operations, it may be a problem, but on paper, I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem.
I just thought I'd ask. I'm keenly aware of Springs Hill situation as well, and they need water. So yeah, it makes sense, whatever deal. I just thought I'd ask.
More questions or comments?
Are we looking at like future or permanent? Is it something that they're gonna want to purchase that water in the future? And then make a more permanent solution to this, or is it something we're gonna be figuring out every several years when this comes up?
Daniel's not here, but I think he wants to participate in
Wells
Wells Ranch 3,
which
which
is a permanent.
would hopefully end that. And I believe, if I remember right, this agreement is a final agreement. I don't think it has any provisions for renewal.
Yeah, that's correct, Brandon. It's a final agreement, and once 2029 rolls around, all bets are off, I guess you can say. So it'll be finalized then. All that water goes back to SAWS.
Okay, moving along to water resources precipitation update.
Okay. Yeah, we can go ahead and go to the next slide here. As of October 31st, because when I updated this last week, that was the most current date that they had on the drought monitor, US drought monitor. You can kind of see down south here, we're still suffering. Once again, the little red dot in Texas there is better than it was this last summer. But still, we're kind of right up in the right-hand corner of that red dot. Next slide. Here's the drought impact on Texas. You can see that it's lessened in the San Antonio and Guadalupe basins. Actually, in a number of those basins around there. And as you're going to see here a little bit later in a few slides, even though the drought has lessened, has become less worse, Canyon Lake continues to drop. So that's not a good sign. And here it is by county, where our plants are located at, where we draw on water from. Precipitation from the San Antonio airport. Again, numbers were taken through October 31st. They tend to update their website on a weekly basis now. And you can see that in October, we did get some more rain, just wasn't enough to catch us up. Look of a historical Canyon Lake level. Unfortunately, here in 2023, it continues to drop. And then here, as of November 3rd, you can see the different levels over the last 3 years. So November 3rd, the level was at 889.36 mean sea level. Today it was at 889.20 at 62.8% full. What I want to talk about at this point is you can see that we have different levels of drought. What I have included as a handout over here is an email I received from GBRA last week. and also talked to them on the phone. They're anticipating that if we don't get significant rain between now and February, March timeframe of 2024, that we're going to enter into stage 3 drought restrictions. Stage 3 is pretty serious. That's when they're going to start policing, if you will, what wholesale water entities are using. And they obviously want to be able to achieve a 15% reduction. They've also asked me if I could put together a summary of how each utility that we serve is implementing their drought plans to try to achieve not only the 10% in stage 2, but also the 15% in stage 3 if we were to reach that point. So basically, we all need to get out and do our rain dances and hope that we get a hurricane or something that goes through and just dumps a lot of water so that we don't have to enter into stage 3. This is the first time, by the way, that we've all faced these kind of conditions in this area. G. Berry was telling me that even the drought in the 50s, the drought of record, that there was still some flow coming into Canyon Lake, whereas there really isn't right now. So, new territory. Okay, I started this a few months ago because I was comparing 2023 to 2009. 2009 was a significant drought, and the lake level, it dropped to the lowest point since the lake had been created and in the 60s. Now you can see just how far we've come in 2023. Breaking records this year, unfortunately.
Adam, Mr. Chair, this is Humberto. I have a question, Adam. I don't know if you can answer this, and if you can't, that's fine, but presume we continue with this reduction occurring in 2024 at 50% reduction of GBRA water. Question I have is, based on what we just discussed earlier with regards to overages, will we have water for overages to occur? Will we have, if there's a reduction of 50%, can we meet our contractual obligations first? I mean, we can, and if there is some need for overages, are we going to have water available from the GBRA supply to meet those overages?
That's a very good question, because in the GBRA contract, what they say is that their drought plan applies to the contract. So essentially, we have to reduce the whole year, or actually what they said is that we have to reduce it month by month on an average use per month. And I asked them, well, what does that mean? Like, how many years do I go back? They said maybe 2 years to go back and just check, what your usage is per month, and then reduce that by the certain amount. So we'd have to go through and we have to do that. And that's an exercise that I'm going to have to do, is to reduce the average flow per month to figure out what that will be. And so I can tell you that according to this year, I don't think that we would be able to make that 15% reduction with what has been used this year. So
I appreciate your honesty. I just think at some point we need to go through that exercise and it continues the way it's continuing, so that we all understand that maybe at the end there may not be any overage opportunities, even though we're working through this. There's some stuff out of our control, and that may be one of them, the supply of water. I'm assuming, and I could be, again, I'm not looking at all the numbers and how it's being recorded and how it's being requested, but there may be some wiggle room with Ball and Cummings. But I mean, if there's going to invoke a 15% reduction, first question, can we meet our contractual obligations? Second question, can we meet the potential overages? And I do know we're saying we're going to bring water supplies in the event that something happens with supply chains and everything else. We need to understand, in this situation next year, if it continues.
Yeah.
What predicament we're going to be at the end of the year.
Very good statement. And just so that everybody understands, this is just on the GBRA water. However, the GBRA water is 2/3 of our supply over at Hayes Caldwell, and it's a large part of our supply here at Lake Dunlap. So it is most of our supply at the two facilities, so it definitely will impact us.
I'd like to add that as a practical matter, water conservation is best achieved during the irrigation season. It's very difficult to achieve much in the way of water conservation efforts if all we're trying to attack is indoor water use.
Yeah, that's another point, Adam. That's gonna be hard to do a month in some of the months that we have when we don't use as much water. So, I mean, because the water used for irrigation and irrigation is the biggest use, so. I don't know how we're gonna do that, but we can put our heads together, I guess.
If you don't have rains in March and April, you're not gonna do that because you're gonna irrigate.
Adam,
And-
I know that this is being talked about drought issues, but the neighborhoods and the houses that we're seeing built, and is this something that we can try to make the legislature understand? You know, as far as trying to slow some of this enormous population growth in favor of the fact that we have a finite amount of a natural resource.
Yeah, very good question.
Can I step in? I think that's a question for your entity or the other entities and not really Canyon Regional to manage growth in our districts. I would hate for Canyon Regional to step in and try to do that in our service area or district. That would be a very big overstep on what their purview in this area would be.
We don't have any control over growth. The city of Marion doesn't have any control over growth in our ETJ either. But there has to be some sort of communication at some point in time where we make the legislature understand, like, we cannot continue
Right.
to allow this to
I
happen.
think it would be up to your entity because Canyon Regional has contractual obligations to the city of Marion, to Maxwell, East Central to fulfill. We're obligated with managing those contracts. So, yeah.
So if I make that comment, I appreciate your comment. If I may, Mr. Chair, just digress. So within my service area, it's being marketed by the governor for development, and we're talking huge development. It's up to the water purveyor to provide that. If not, they lose their CCN. So I'm going to do in the best, my ability to provide water, find water, do what I need to. So by going to legislature, you know, again, who represents this area, who represents this as a representative, and their interest is development, jobs, economic development. So I hear what you're saying, but unfortunately, some of that stuff is like the mandates where it's not funded and you've got to do what you got to do. And so as a water purveyor, it's up to us to do that. And Justin is correct. And so that's where it is within my area. Within Justin's, I'm assuming it's the same, and others it's just different. But my area is basically a political hotbed with regards to governor looking at it and wanting large development, large industries. I mean, we're talking huge uses of water.
Just a couple of pieces of information for you. Canyon Regional is a part of Texas Rural Water Association, and they do a lot with trying to get legislation through to help rural entities out and that sort of thing. So it's they're a good group to kind of jump on board with. I'm not trying to sell them, but I'm just saying this is what they do. And I don't know if Marion's a part of TRWA. But that's a good avenue. But I also do want to say, and I'm not trying to overreach and tell entities what to do when I say this, the GBRA did mention that they think that the significant difference between 2009 and 2023 is the population. That there's been a huge population increase, and that's why the lake's dropping as fast as it is.
This is Stephen with Martindale Water. Proposition 6 passed yesterday. The $1 billion that was put aside for maybe some of these issues we're going to deal with. And I don't know, maybe if we have someone that could possibly entertain trying to tap in for Canyon Regional into some of those funds, possibly to assist either the regional entity or the member entities. Just an idea for thought there.
More comments on drought Canyon Lake update? All right, let's move on to water quality, taste and odor update, staff.
All right, really quickly, because we had a taste and odor event that happened this last year, and it appears that it was what they call MIB that caused the taste and odor issue. So we're tracking the two elements that cause taste and odor, geosmin and MIB. And you can see on this graph here that we have the detection levels. And those detection levels are really low. So it's somebody that has like super sniffers and tasters that can detect it. And so MIB and geosmin have stayed below those detection levels. And these are just the results. We're going to continue to track this throughout the year because I'm kind of interested on what the impact is going to be now that the lake is up to its level that it needs to be at. And as we come into this next spring, we're going to track these closely so that we can try to mitigate as much as possible any impact there might be if there are some taste and odor issues. Try to cut it off at the beginning. But we're going to continue to monitor that here. I know, like I said, 2/3 of our flow over at Hayes Caldwell is from Lake Dunlap here. So this essentially is good information both for Hayes Caldwell and for here. Any questions on that?
Move on to disinfection byproduct update.
Okay, so I don't know if y'all remember, but we used to include just a summary of our sampling that we do throughout CRWA. We essentially go into your systems and we sample for trihalomethanes to see how well we're doing and what's going on with trihalomethanes and halioacidic acids. And so I wanted to include just this table over the last year and a half on the sample results. Maxwell did have some higher sample results. As you all know, up there in the Hayes Caldwell area, we stopped using chloramines here a few years ago because we were having some issues. We couldn't figure it out. And so in the summertime, we do see some spiking that happens in the Hayes Caldwell facility. And so thus the reason for ozone.
Yeah, we've been in violation on trihalomethanes for the last 4 years. We haven't come out yet. And this goes into our conversation yesterday. I have, with what little control I have to blend any water to bring those down. So.
And Martindale was pretty close, it looked like on the report too.
Yes, but we're able to blend it down with our well water. But there are times we receive over the MCL.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment with regards to this item. I don't know if y'all can provide this staff, but PFAS, what is, this is a board agenda item. It's been discussed. I don't know if you can elaborate on here or maybe later on in the agenda. What is the status of PFAS class action lawsuit with regards to that Canyon Regional? What was the thought process? If you don't know the answer, that's fine. I think it would have been appropriate at this point to talk about it, but I suggest if you don't know, that's fine, but just move along. Maybe at the end, it could be brought up.
Or questions or comments for Adam on disinfection byproducts? Treated water production update, current water treatment operations staff.
So Lake Dunlap production's running between 7-8 million a day right now. We're putting more of the load over on the Wells Ranch. One thing to keep the raw water numbers down here some, and also we're doing a lot of maintenance here right now. We had one of the generators back here to get a hole in the radiator. We had to take it off and get it rebuilt, so the plant did not have generation power here. Did get that fixed. They installed the radiator back on it last week. When they did, they hit the fuel solenoid and cracked it. So we got diesel coming out. They got a new one coming. If we had to run it, it was good, but as of right now, we're still down on that. We're also doing a lot of rehab work on the ozone generators. All the seals and gaskets on them, we're replacing, going through all of them. We're starting to get lots of leaks on them back here. Wells Ranch, we're producing 9-10 million a day out there. Well one is still down. They put it all back together, pumped and everything in it this week. We cranked it up. Something is still binding in it. Shut it off immediately. They're back out there again today. They're gonna pull it out and try to figure out what's going on. The crew's doing lots of cleanup work around all the sites out there currently. Hayes Caldwell production out of the coke system stages is about 1.3 a day, about 1 million a day out of the Paul trailer. Also had to replace the river intake pump a couple of weeks ago. We did in one day. The bearing on the pump was out, which was causing the flow to go down to about a third of what it was. We are getting it rebuilt, so we have a backup. We also ran electricity down to the river for the backup pump, so we quit running the generator and using up so much diesel over there. And then it slowed down quite a bit just because production is down. We're not putting near the pressure on the coke system. And we have started winterizing at all the locations. And the new switch gear was delivered just a few minutes ago here for 1604. Should get it installed next week. Any questions?
Okay, water rights and water usage.
Right. So first we have here the Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch water usage summary. Here. We can start with the Wells Ranch. So this right here is the Wells Ranch monthly raw water demand comparison. What I mean by that is I'm comparing 2022 to 2023. This is the plant overall, how much acre feet that we've produced through the whole plant out of Gonzales County and Guadalupe County. You can see there in the graph that we have a total annual raw water available to us just over 13,000 acre feet. And when you scroll down and you look at the graph, this is how we're trending for 2023, and the orange is considerably lower than what we were in 2022. However, Lake Dunlap is trending higher, so they even each other out. This is a Wells Ranch daily production, just kind of give you an idea of what the average day is. And the current the average day for 2022, the current average day for 2023 currently. And then the contract average day capacity, that's what we have contracted per day. And just the times that we've actually gone over what was contracted per day. Here is Guadalupe County Carrizo well usage. We have 2 permits with Guadalupe County. We have one for Carrizo water and we have one for Wilcox water. This is a comparison between 2022 and 2023, and you can see how we're trending underneath 2022. And then this is, of course, the Guadalupe Wilcox well usage. And again, we are actually trending higher. We're using more Wilcox water this year than we were using last year. And then Gonzales County, we have several wells out there. And we are tracking Gonzales County a lot closer to make sure that we don't overpump our permit. And so you can see that we're tracking a lot less this year than we were last year.
Adam, it looks like you're missing the Wells Ranch Lake Dunlap chart that shows individual entity usage.
I didn't see it.
I apologize. I'll have to get that to y'all. Yeah. Okay, so, here's the Hayes Caldwell. The first part of that, as you can see, this is January through October. And again, this is based off of a calendar year. This is calendar year usage. That's the kind of accounting I have to do, not only for the state, but also for GBRA. That's how they want me to report to them. So this is from January 1st through October 31st of this year. And have our raw water inventory up there in the left top. And then as you go down, I do want to make this comment. I made it last time, but I'll make it again. Is that in the raw water inventory, you can see that we have 2,898.16 acre feet of raw water that's underneath the contract underneath. Trying to remember the exhibit. I think it's Exhibit A, Section 1 or something like that. And so that's what we have in raw water that we're utilizing. Over on the right-hand side, I have our raw water usage, but then also as you go down, I have what the annual contract is towards the middle. The contract, and we've asked the question why, and we don't really know, but there's 2,908 acre feet that's contracted for Hayes Caldwell. So there's 10 acre feet more that's contracted than what we actually have in raw water. It's been that way for the last 20 years, over 20 years. So that's why I have the two different columns there. You can see what we've actually used in raw water and how much of the contract has been used. Then down below, there's some footnotes and a chart that shows each one of our rights that we have and how much we used. I do want to say, I was going to add to this, but I missed it. This chart here is not to scale. So just for your information. So here's the usage chart that Humberto was asking about earlier. Is do we have enough raw water for this year? Of course, this does not have the drought numbers incorporated into it. These are the real numbers, and that's an exercise that we're going to have to do. And so this is actual usage, and for 2023, it's trending like we're going to end up close to the same as 2022, maybe a little bit higher. It depends on the usage for November and December.
Martindale's 200 acre feet.
No. No, I took their 200 acre feet out of there, 255.84. And then GBRA water usage per month. See what we used and what we didn't use. Graph. And again, this one's going to have to get updated to account for drought numbers. And then here's the usage by entity. And again, I apologize for not getting the Wells Ranch Lake Dunlap in there. This is for Hayes Caldwell. So the first part of this is treated delivered water. And then as you go down further into this table, you can see that they have the percentage take of each month for each entity. And then that percentage is applied to the raw water. When you go to the next page, there's a table here that would have how much raw water each utility took for each month. And then also the year to date down below in the total.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Adam, I have a question. What date is this? October what?
This goes through October 31st.
Okay.
So it's January through October.
Is there any way, and I've asked this in the past, and Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask that you ask this and to get this accomplished, that for these meetings, we have the information as of to date. And I know the staff said they could do it, and I've requested that in the past. The response they gave me was they were too busy. So I'm asking you, Chair, that we have, with regards to Hayes Caldwell, with the situation we're in, we have the information to date, with regards to where we're at and the date. So that way, and I believe you also asked some type of trend line. So we start understanding with these last 2 months where we're going to be with regards to potential overages. And I think it helps all of us as a group understand where that number is going to be at. And there's no surprises at the end. I just think that's a good exercise.
Yeah, this is only 7 days old or 8 days old. When we discussed last time, we were almost a month behind because we moved the meeting. I don't know. I see your point, but I don't know how much more 7 days of usage would really act. Comment I would make, but he is right about the information I requested. And for that purpose, but yeah. I'm happy to get it in a more timely than we used to.
Well, part of that too is moving the meeting. But it won't always be like that, right? Because there's sometimes where this will be on the first Wednesday. Lucky this is the second Wednesday. So if I remember right, it's going to be a little bit trickier. But it's going to be better data, like
Yeah,
what you want. It's going to be only a couple days old rather than 7
And
or 8.
both are valid, comments, Justin's and yours, but I just want to make sure when we sit down, we know what that number is. That way, I'm assuming we resolve it this first, up until 2024 gets resolved. I do not know, but I think it's a exercise that basically just has us all understand. Cooperate and collaborate. We need to understand what that number is.
Yeah, I think what I'd have to do is probably do some sort of a trend line on a daily basis, for the number of days that are not reported, for that month. So, I mean, that's definitely achievable. It would take me a little bit of time to get something like that together. That's the total usage. Yeah. For each entity though, I would have to put it together for each entity. Yeah.
Any other comments for Adam on water resources? The only one I have is, how we've discussed the charts and graphs before, and
I will, I tell you, I'll update that and I'll send it out to you all.
Okay.
I apologize again for not getting that in there.
right. Paul Mobile Unit, Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant, Paul Mobile Unit. Oh, wait, where are we at?
Water treatment plant improvements projects, number 6.
Oh, number 6, I'm sorry. Staff and Ardura.
UA, would you mind coming up?
Let's start checking them off, Justin.
Morning, everyone. Just a really quick update on the Hayes Caldwell water treatment plant improvements. So this is the project, everything outside the membrane building. We have received all approvals from the city of San Marcos as well as Caldwell County. We have passed all those permits to TWDB for them to finish up the environmental condition verbiage, which we needed to include it in the bid document before we can advertise. So my latest email from Kristen Miller, who is our environmental reviewer with TWDB this morning, she said that she's going to send me that verbiage today. So the next item on the slides is the proposed bidding schedule. We talked about we're going to phase the project to advertise the new ground storage tank first, and then advertise the remaining components at the later date. So these a proposed date I presented to Kenyon Regional, and I wanted to bring this up over here, make sure everybody's on board and agree with that, and no further questions before we take this, because we have to include some of these dates in our final bid document. So I like to get everybody's agreement on that.
Schedule's correct. I mean, do you have to get approval from Canyon Regional with regards to going out for bid, or you just pretty much do it? Okay.
No, there's no requirement to have pre-approval before we go out to bid. Requirement to approve the contract when it's ready to go.
Okay, so we will taking those dates and put them in the final bid document. So we're targeting to get the final bid document before Thanksgiving, and I'm not sure if there's any internal signature we needed to get from Kenyon Regional.
I think it would be prudent for Canyon Regional to read through the bid documents and make sure that they've put their eyes on it and staff
Okay.
concurs with the way the bid documents are drafted. I think that's just good oversight.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. We will get that submitted, the plans and the specifications, and then the following dates, those just the date for the advertisement. And I think based on the previous discussion, Adam, you're going to help with using CVcast, assuming that's still the direction.
It's been set up. Hannah did it.
Okay, all right, yeah. I think that's basic it, and then I put the pre-bid meeting site visit, and just make sure as we're getting close, we coordinate with the plant to make sure the staff are over there for the site visit.
Comments or questions for UA?
Can we go back to the slide? I do want to talk about the bid opening. Is that date okay? That's before Christmas. Want to make sure there are people here if we do the bid opening.
It's okay with us. I'll be here because
Yeah.
we need this to happen. It's
Okay.
been 6 years and $22 million later, so let's do something.
All right.
You
Okay.
don't anticipate the holidays keeping people from bidding on the project, right? That doesn't.
Based on since this first phase is just a tank, my conversation with the tank supply, they are okay. They
Okay.
actually like to get this, instead of for them to work through the holiday, they would like to get this done before the holiday. Okay, all right. Let's go to the next slide.
Actually, I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
We had an issue with the other project where the tanks were done under separate contract and the electricians and that. This is going to be one contract, and then the bidders on the tank, are they going to sub out the other work?
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, all right, let's move to next slide. A quick update on the grant application. So we got all the signature yesterday, and so Courtney is getting everything submitted this week. I do want to mention, we got a notification that deadline got extended to February, but we're still targeting to get everything turned in this week. Ozonation study, that report or tech memo has been submitted last week. And just to let us know once you finish your review, if there's a comments you wanted to get together to go over the comments.
Well, we have a few comments for you.
All right. Update on the membrane project. I know there's a agenda item after this. We'll talk about the recommendation of issue the remaining fundings to proceed with other tasks. What I wanted to mention, we already started working with Paul and getting all the data from the mobile trader so we can review and benchmark their performance. And the next step will be develop the pilot protocol and get to the TCQ. At the same time, we wanted to start the pilot testing that data for the design purpose. Any questions?
I've got a question. This is Mr. Ramos. And this goes along with what Brandon brought up, and I wasn't sure how we address this. But with regards to tank construction, there's pretty much just two companies I'm aware of. One of them we had a situation with. So maybe it's more of a legal question, whether we feel comfortable entering into a construction agreement with previous, I do not know. I think, if I may, I think what would help also is if our chair of this committee for the board manager to be part of that process to just watch it and make sure that we're covering all bases, because I don't want to be in a situation where we can sell based on bids too, right? What if you just get one? Yeah, so I don't know. I just thought I'd just mention that.
Can I offer some
Yes.
input? So the process we have in the bid document is competitive sealed proposal process. So in addition to the cost criteria, we also have a qualification criteria, which including, past experience working with Kenyan Regional, past performance, and those type of things. So each criteria has been assigned with different weight, and we're going to assign score and have based on the total weighted score to select who is the contractor to award. So I think that process can address your comments.
And I'll give you a general comment that I don't think probably helps at the end of the day, but as far as I'm aware in that settlement agreement from that prior experience, there was nothing precluding them from bidding.
I mean,
Another
that
question.
helps too, right? Because you don't want to exclude, you want to include, but vice versa. Just, and I would advocate again that we have our chair be part of this process and just kind of monitor, look over, whatever the point may be. And it impacts Hayes Caldwell and learn from past experiences from things that.
Probably need to look at the procurement policy and see how it expects bids to be handled. It may require some kind of quasi committee to review the bids. I know that that was a concern with the policy committee. I haven't been attending a policy committee in quite some time, but when I was, some of the concern was the oversight, allowing the firm to just say, this is the way to go, making sure that staff and maybe some level of other board participation. I would recommend that staff go through that procurement policy and make sure we're adhering to it as we've adopted it.
Would you like me to forward you that in the bid document? This was based on a previous discussion with the staff. We have the CSP process, or you
No,
don't need
I
it?
would not like you to forward it to me.
Okay.
And it could be
Who do you want
Justin.
me to distribute it if everybody wanted to see it?
I think staff needs to determine what the procurement policy says.
Okay.
And find out. I think
think-
that additional oversight's never bad,
Yeah,
and I
I
think the
mean-
procurement policy may call for it.
Yeah, I mean, because we've talked about having the construction committee do a lot of
Yes.
this other stuff. And basically, if it's, we can take some of the stuff away from construction committee, put on the board of managers and Justin, it makes only sense that we do that.
Unfortunately, they may require one member of the construction committee to be on that.
Stephen, you had a question.
The current haul trailer that's in operation at the site, the data that's currently being generated, that can be applied to the pilot?
The data has been generated, can be applied to the pilot, can be used for the pilot study. However, based on the TCQ, they also looking at, in addition to the membrane performance, they also require you to collect other water quality data. So that's the component I doubt that has been done yet, because this is to supplement your full scale plant, right? And not necessarily for the gathering the data for the piloting purpose. So we will need to get those data to make sure TCQ's requirement is met.
So like temperature and turbidity and other parameters?
The temperature turbidity will be part of it, but there will be other, metal data and non-metal organic, everything else needed to be collected.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we will get all the data we can get from Paul and see what we can use, and then identify the gap. So in that way, we can make that process instead of going through 60-day, another 60-day, we can make that perhaps optimize shorter.
And UA, I assume you're aware, and y'all probably evaluated this, but there was a pilot, if I remember correctly, Paul did a pilot here at Lake Dunlap as well with obviously similar water quality. I don't know if that's useful for y'all.
We are aware of that. My concern was using that data. That data has been there for such a long time,
Sure.
and water quality tends to change over years, and we will feel more comfortable, looking at the latest. And certainly we can also look at the past pilot information as well.
You know better than I do.
The other thing, I know it's not on the slide, but I wanted to just circle back. This is the question related to the benefit cost analysis to eliminate the decant pond as part of the improvement project. So we have ran analysis and working with David, got some cost information from him based on the past performance. So the option one we talked about is to keep the current operation. Don't build the new decant pond and decant pump station. So by doing that, we needed to purchase 4 more frac tanks, which the estimate cost is 173,056. And I can share this later on. And then given the current loads, and we estimated we will have a total of 363 loads per year. And then the estimated annual hauling cost for that is 285,150. So this is the option. Don't build the new decant pond, keep the current operation, but getting additional frac tanks and hauling off-site. The second option is building the new decant pond and the pump station. Production cost is 1.2 million for that. In addition, you still have to haul the sludge off the pond. We estimated the frequency to clean the pond at 3 times a year. That gives to 782,839. So I think based on this and we would recommend to keep the current operation to help with the project budget constraints.
David or John, could you send that information to the participants that met that day? That way we can look at it.
When I get it, yes.
Yeah, I haven't sent this yet because I forgot. First I wasn't sure if this is the time to talk about
Right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later. I'm glad that you brought it up, even though I haven't gone out
Yeah.
yet, because those are important numbers.
Yeah, but it is actually here on item C. It says value engineering, so perfect timing.
Okay.
Perfect.
I thought that that's something else, but
It is on the agenda and it's timely. Thank you.
Do you have anything else?
No, we got one more item. Next page. Funding gap.
I think she covered it in her presentation. She talked about the grants.
Talk about what we just signed yesterday.
Okay, let's move on to membrane improvements reimbursement resolution. This was the reimbursement resolution that Brandon spoke of at the beginning of the meeting about 2 hours ago, that the construction committee recommends for approval to the Board of Trustees. John or Adam, are you taking this?
To expedite the process, I would just recommend we move forward as a recommendation.
Yeah, I
The
think
Board
we
of
all know
Management
what a
is-
reimbursement resolution is.
Yeah, it's important. You have to have it so we can recapture the cost for doing the engineering before we have funding.
So is everybody comfortable with me taking that recommendation to the Board of Trustees on Monday?
Yes.
Moving on to the engineering service order, the Hayes Caldwell Group met and we all decided that it was very important to engage Ardura with the entire scope of their proposed scope. And that's what you have here. We as in the Board of Construction Committee have made the recommendation, are going to make the recommendation to proceed as well. Anybody have any discussion on that?
I would echo supporting that recommendation as well.
I will also mention that Humberto brought up at the construction committee, something important for everyone to understand is, that money comes out of general funds at first and then
Right.
it's reimbursed when it's funded. And I committed to explaining that to the full board and I will do that
Okay.
at the Board of Trustee meeting.
Anyone else have any issues with me expressing that recommendation from this group?
Yeah, Justin, I had a question. When the results came out, who was on top of that? Who was the first choice? Was it Ardura?
Yeah, so there was a committee that chose Ardura. They proposed a scope. The 5 or 6 of us entities who are participating in that project only approved a partial amount of that scope. And what we're doing today is recommending following up with the entire scope that was given to us.
So I guess, through that committee, because I was part of that committee, I thought that Garver was the top of that.
No, that's Dunlap.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I
Hayes
apologize.
That's our other membrane problem.
I will share that recommendation as well.
Yeah.
Now we're moving on to Jacob's, Blake Dunlap scope and contract negotiations with Garver. Staff or Garver?
Nothing new to report, except we've been working with Treya to get the contract language amended. I've asked, Mark Hall to come and talk about funding opportunities as well. Mark?
Generally speaking, I'm going to recommend to you that you consider focusing on the Water Development Board funding. As you know, as we heard earlier, that the legislature, we just passed $1 billion worth of funding, which is going to go into the Water Development Boards. It's going to give you more opportunities. So if you have a lot of experience with the Water Development Board, I think you're going to have opportunities to do more. So would like to recommend to you that you monitor any new programs that they're developing and stay right on it and get on the list. That's the main thing with the funding for this type of project. Cannot tell you if they're going to prioritize this project or not, because they haven't developed the program yet, but they do have other programs. So I brought a list of interest rates. I can leave it with you, or we can pass it out.
Leave it with me and I'll
Okay.
get it
There you
distributed.
go. Several copies.
Mark, with regards to the recent developments of the election and the passage and the $1 billion, when do you think this is going to get up and running? Because I have been speaking with the Water Development Board the past 6 months, and knowing this was going to come through and was going to take a vote. And I know they've been gearing up with staff. They're hiring staff. They're trying to do this. When do you think it's going to take 6 months before they design the program? And, how long does it typically take them to do something?
I think it's going to take at least 6 months, but let me qualify a little bit. They have made recent changes in staffing. They moved your representative, the one, I don't know if you know him by name, Dane Larson, work with him. They moved him and made him a assistant director. So I need to find out who the new person's going to be to coordinate. So that right there, those things right there are going to slow it down a little bit. But let me also say that recently the Water Development Board has implemented some programs lightning fast, faster than I've ever seen anything. And y'all participated in one, which was the emerging contaminant, which you're ranked 11 out of 17 applicants on that. And I have some thoughts about how you may be able to increase your ranking if you want to do that. We can talk about that too. So I think that it's just a monitoring deal. I wouldn't plan on it. My question here, hearing the discussion earlier, was just if you do have funding gaps, when do you need the money, and factor that into your process. Competitive seal bids here in this last project, factor in, and also a December opening, factor in closing time to take a funding application to the board, time to prepare the application, take it to the board, close on it. And you do have the ability to hold bids and things like that to help extend and give you some time to time your funding. But my recommendation is to factor the funding in your project schedule as well, which I believe Ardura is probably doing. Yeah. And that's all the comments I have, unless you have any questions.
Appreciate you. Let's move to water transmission improvement projects. TxDOT, CRWA, I-10 Santa Clara, and Zool transmission line encasement project update, staff and utility engineering group.
I've asked David to comment on this. Go ahead, David.
All right, David Kniper with Utility Engineering Group. And so for under item 7A, the TxDOT IH10 project, Brandon provided a pretty good summary at the beginning of this meeting on items 1 and 2, the change order number 2 proposed for the project, and supplemental agreement number 1. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are. If y'all want any more additional information on that, be happy to answer those questions.
This is a recommendation that the construction committee is going to take to the full board on Monday. It is fully reimbursable.
Okay, does the Board of Managers want to second that recommendation? Or hear anybody against me making that recommendation? Thank you.
I just
Supplemental
didn't want to
agreement.
make the recommendation as I'm the one already
Yeah.
making a construction committee recommendation, so.
And that's all I think we're looking for here today is just, I guess, yeah, consensus for the construction committee's recommendation that they made last week. For item 7B, the TechStot FM 1518 project, the only update I have on this is we've held our project pre-construction meetings with TechStot. We're working with the contractor right now to identify a date to begin mobilization so we can set our notice to proceed. In the meantime, we've been reviewing contractor submittals and have provided those back to the contractor. So that project should be moving towards construction here, hopefully later this month.
This one needing a recommendation as well?
No
This just
no
an
action
update?
needed on this item. Yes, sir.
TxDOT CRWA 1518 transmission line project update and estimated costs.
That was that project update. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Item 7C, the asset management and GIS update.
Okay.
As Brandon also mentioned earlier in his opening comments, originally this phase 4 of the GIS project, we had set it up to where Canyon Regional was going to purchase, and they have purchased a handheld GPS unit, and they were going to utilize staff time to pick up all of the asset information that we need for the Mid-Cities transmission main verification portion of the project. As Brandon mentioned, that Canyon Regional has moved that staff to other projects here at Canyon Regional. And so I worked with John and staff to prepare a service order for us and our subconsultant Collier's Engineering Design to do that work under our contract and perform that work. So that's what this service order item is, y'all's considerations. Correct. To our current service order for GIS, yes.
Okay,
This was also a recommendation from the construction committee, and I just remind you all that a lack of recommendation from the board of managers doesn't derail anything. It only, if there's a recommendation, it just strengthens our recommendation. So if you're at a point where you're looking at some of this stuff and you've asked questions and you still don't really have enough information, it's okay to say no. You aren't going to hurt my feelings. Some of this is just having additional review. If you feel like you haven't been able to do enough for that review, then don't vote it forward. It's still going to go to the board of trustees because that's what I've been told to do. Just to kind of clarify the process just a little bit in case any of you may be apprehensive at times.
any problems with me seconding the construction committee's recommendation from this board? Sure. CRWA design standards and specs, staff and UEG.
So on this item, we have prepared a draft set of standard details that we've reviewed with staff. We're in the process of making some updates to those, as well as combining those with some standard specifications. Looking forward to getting the updated draft to staff this month.
What was used in the past, like saws or something like that, or version of several?
Yep. Several. Originally, when we started this process, we went back through all of our old as-builts that we had compiled with the GIS project and kind of pulled out all the variations of details that have been used in the past. And so that's kind of what we used as somewhat of a starting point. But it was really a hodgepodge variation of different standards and details.
Eric, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Back on the last item, did we already purchase a Trimble or a GIS?
We did.
device?
Yeah. And so Jacob, to answer your question, I think what you're alluding to, we're going to use that item, and that's factored into our service order. So we're going to use that equipment, and we're going to come up with a method of either checking it out here or, using it for a period of time and returning it. So yes, we're going to use that equipment in our process.
Deal. Item E, Hayes Caldwell Transmission Line Alternatives Analysis.
This is a work in progress. We've accomplished quite a bit. We're looking at several different alternative routes in terms of costing for the pipeline, engineering services, and the cost of easements. It's not completed yet, but it is far along and should be completed probably in the next week or two. David, would you like to add anything to that?
The only thing is I'm meeting with the pump people tomorrow morning, so we come up with the numbers for the pumps, what we're gonna do on them.
I'll say that I met with Brandon and David yesterday to discuss some of these alternatives and what our preference was. I think he was going to go to the other groups soon too. And then we should together once all this is compiled. So, important that we do.
Yeah, in here we have the wheeling agreement, and so we met with Maxwell and appreciate
Correct.
having the meeting and getting some of their concerns on the wheeling agreement, how it works long-term, if it works long-term, got their concerns heard, our concerns were heard about the timing issue and how we move this thing forward. I still think it probably is in the best interest of the group to kind of meet one-on-one to give everyone a chance to have some input on their concerns and maybe potential routes that weren't identified. And then it will need to come to the full Hayes Caldwell group to make a determination on. And that's how we hope that process will go out. And then it will follow the normal process of the construction committee. Y'all will get to hear about it here at the Board of Managers and then to the full board.
Water Development Projects, Alliance Regional Water Authority Project Update.
I don't know that Alliance has got anything. Or I don't have my copy with me, but I do know that they've been invited to make a presentation to the Board of Trustees where they're at. Talk to Graham Moore. He's will prepare a presentation on that. And he has a couple of other agenda items that he would like us to take up. So that'll
be on Monday.
That's on Monday. Yes, that's planned.
Wells Ranch 3 Project Planning, Groundwater Leasing and Permitting Update, staff.
On the leasing, we have a preliminary hearing that's going on right now, started at 10 o'clock today in Gonzales County on our application for 920 acre feet. That purpose of that hearing is to determine the standing of a couple of objectors case who've requested a tested case hearing on our application. I don't know the status of that yet. Ongoing, our council prepared a brief, don't have standing. We'll see where that goes. Regarding Guadalupe County, we've got a tentative meeting set up with a large landowner to possibly lease some property from them. Hasn't been set yet. It could be about 500 acre feet.
Have five, last week I asked, you had 5,000 leased and we're looking for 13 total?
About 12.
Well, so the 900 you're in permitting right now, that's not for Wells Ranch 3, correct? That was,
The 920 is for Wells Ranch 3.
yes, okay.
We have received, on the next item, we've received the conceptual engineering design from Tri Hydro. We're in the process of reviewing that information and we had at this present time.
Okay, draft water supply and treatment contract update.
Again, that's in the hands of bond counsel. They've made a lot of progress, I'm told. We'll be getting with them shortly to talk about what amendments they're going to be recommending.
When do you think the group can get together to review that?
I don't know. We'll try to get something scheduled in the next week or two if we can. Before the holidays would be best.
Yeah, I think that first part of December may be best for me anyway, time wise. We've already done number 9, A and B. Item 10 is items for next Board of Managers meeting or trustees meeting.
I think I'd like to make sure that we have an update for what GBRA's requirements for the reduction on stage 3. And if there's any leeway. I guess my biggest concern is if you're taking data from 2 years ago and everyone's increased their water by a significant amount, I don't think this is achievable by what they're asking, and so we need to find out what the options are. That's concerning.
I don't know if we're gonna have a meeting, but this might be the last meeting of the year. If I'm remembering right. So Adam, if you can clarify that and send it out to the managers.
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
Yeah, historically, the managers have made a decision on whether to hold
Oh,
a
okay.
December meeting or not. Always, ended up being, at the end of the month. And so, well, I guess it's kind of different now. So we would have this at the beginning of December. I think I would make the suggestion that we hold the meeting if the Board of Trustees plans on holding a December
Absolutely.
trustee meeting. If they don't, I think we would cancel the meeting.
Yeah.
Sorry, would you repeat what you were?
The Board of Trustees historically doesn't hold a December meeting unless there's something, major going on that they need to hold the meeting for. And so there may not be a reason to hold a Board of Managers meeting a week before the Board of Trustee meeting that doesn't exist.
Good to me. Any announcements?
The construction committee right now is tentatively set for the end of November. It'd be the last Tuesday of November at 1 o'clock. Similarly, if staff doesn't have any pressing issues, it needs a direct response by the construction committee, as we do have some small authority. If they don't need anything from us, we won't meet.
Does, since the bylaws have changed, John, does Hannah or anyone need to send San Marcos the resolution to appoint a member to this board? Or to Sauce?
If they so choose to elect to do that, yes.
Just, your resolution.
You're going to prepare, I'm sorry, you're going to prepare a resolution yourself or what? Not for this board meeting, but in the future?
For the Board of Managers, for their appointment to the Board of Managers.
Board of Managers, I'm sorry. I think
Will
you're talking
require
about-
council action.
Thank you.
Adjourn.
Thank you.